Now to introduce our speakers today, we have Krish Suresh from Bristlecone. Krish is the Global Practice Leader of Procurement at Bristlecone. He has over 25 years of industry and consulting experience in procurement re-engineering, analytics, IT consulting, and implementation of procurement solutions. We also have with us Mike Judd from Tradeshift. Mike is the Senior Director of Product Marketing at Tradeshift. He has a long history with procurement and financial solutions and working with customers on best practices. With that said, I will hand it over to Mike. Mike, it is all yours.
Deanne, thank you. Interesting how you said long history in procurement. It certainly has been. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining our webinar today. Krish and I are very excited to talk about using digital transformation to create value and unlock working capital in your supply chain. So big title, certainly lots to talk about. So we're excited to talk to you about this today. Just by way of agenda, what we'd like to do is, first of all, define digital transformation. That means many things to many people. So we want to make sure we're on the same page when we define that. So we want to describe what does that look like? And how do you know when you get there? And certainly, how do you know when you're done? If you're ever done with that, right? So then we'll go back a little bit, and it's certainly going to be a journey for you. So we know we want to start with fixing what's broken. So let's talk about the good starting points. What's broken and where do we start? And then seller is going to be a very big part of your success. So we want to talk about how to get better seller participation to really accelerate the value and get you to something as we described in the topic of digital transformation. And then let's talk about when the humans get involved. You know, how do we get more exception-free AP? How do you get more sellers? How do you do more invoice processing? But how do you do it without so many people getting involved all the time, right? So how can we reduce that? And last, again, we'll revisit, come back to what we call the adaptive enterprise. That's one that we feel has reached digital transformation. So we'll talk about what that means, and that'll bring us full circle through our story here. So let's start with digital transformation. You know, what is it? And it's a question mark here because it does mean a lot of different things to many people. And some people on the call may not have thought of a digital transformation program yet, right? So maybe this is a question mark for your future even. But certainly a lot of question with digital transformation. But we already have a good taste for it now. Think of your daily lives, and I'm sure all of you have a smartphone, and maybe some of you are using it right this moment, but hope not. But certainly we know we're very powerful at home. You know, we can get cars to come to our driveway, and we know when that car is going to arrive, and we know we're going to get to the airport on time, for instance. We know when food's going to arrive. In fact, you can get custom food delivered to your doorstep, right? This is the power that we have with our apps today. We can move the physical world, right, pretty quickly and make life convenient for us. So we talk about a digital experience there. This is something that, you know, we're very powerful and make things move faster. So it's connected, right? We're connected to the things out there, to moving cars, to people that are going to drive into the airport. It's very convenient. And the third thing is in context. So if I'm thinking about food, I'm going to get the food delivery. If I need a ride to the airport, there's something there that gets me a car and be able to attract that car to my driveway on time. So that's what we talk about, the digital experience. Very connected, very convenient, and in context, depending on the app you use. So we recognize these logos right here, right? This is some very powerful apps that we have at home. But yet, at work, very different story, and that's why we're all on the call today, right? That in some cases, we can't get a status of an invoice. Suppliers are calling up saying, hey, when am I going to get paid? Because they don't have that experience, right? We don't know when our order is going to arrive. These are things that we don't know who's going to approve our next requisition. So we don't know these things. We don't have that same power at work. Until we get to be more powerful at work. Well, here's part of our journey right here. If you recognize the logos in the top right, and I'm sure most of you do in my work life, these are some very new up-and-coming apps. Probably not even up-and-coming, they're already there, right? They make life easier on the sales side, the HR side, and doing collaboration. So we think of these as more adaptive and collaborative apps, right? They're outcome-based visualization. Basically, you want to do something, you want to move the physical world, so you're driving more of those outcomes. How do I get that Uber driver to drive at my driveway in time for me to get to the airport? Those are the outcomes, and then the power to drive that is what's behind these apps, right? if you look at the starting point, I think this is where a lot of people are today, on the control reactive on the bottom left-hand side, looking very much at process, very process-oriented, right? How do I get the invoices to move faster? How do I get rid of these stacks of paper? How do I become more electronic, right? So they're kind of focused more on the kind of the process side of it rather than the outcomes. So what we want to point you to today is something that looks very much like the top right, where we can describe something that's very outcome-based and it's adaptive and collaborative. So with that, on the next slide, we make the distinction, and we'll do this several times throughout the presentation, electronic versus digital. So on the right-hand side, this is kind of the prize, so I'll start there. On the right-hand side, we talked about that digital experience that you have at home, right? You're moving the physical world. You have status. You have visibility. You're connected in real time. That's what you're getting on the right-hand side. But I think most people, when we look at the processes and the way people want to deal with those process efficiencies, is more the left-hand side. Sure, that left-hand side is going to keep you up to date in electronics. You're going to know it's 10:58 on a Sunday, right? But you're on a plane moving 3 time zones, and you land on the left-hand side. What do I have to do? I have to hit the buttons to readjust the time. On the right-hand side, as soon as I get it out of airplane mode, it already knows that I'm in a specific time zone. Here's the time. And by the way, I've adjusted your calendar. So that 3 o'clock meeting is really 12 o'clock based on the time change. So that's what we want to talk about today, that experience on the right-hand side versus making things electronic on the left. I know, Krish, you had some great comments on this slide.
Right. So thanks, Mike. I think, the primary point that I wanted to make is, today in the business world, even though there is some amount of digitalization that happens, right? I mean, it's very limited. So if you, just to put it in context of invoices and AP, right? I mean, people are able to, just using service procurement, for example, right? People are able to go in and submit, are not able to submit service entry sheets using any kind of mobile applications, but you would be able to approve anything that comes in. So, what we're saying is, while we are still in the B2C space, we've gone a long way ahead. Whereas the B2B space, even though there is some digitization, it still is kind of very, very, very primitive stages, if you will. So in the business world, we look more like the picture shows on the left, the watches on the left, and we want to try and move more and more towards the iPhone and the experience that we have in the B2C space. And I think you'll see in subsequent slides, how we take you from the left side to the right.
Yeah, exactly right, Krish. You're describing kind of the electronic side of it versus digital, right? In the electronic world, we pass things around. We pass the documents, we pass invoices around, right? But as soon as something changes, that invoice is out of date, but it's already gone to the next system, right? You're already processing a that won't match an invoice. So electronic just moves things around a lot quicker, but you don't get that digital experience on the right-hand side like an Uber, where I know exactly where my car is at this particular moment. So yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
So what we'd like to paint for you the rest of the day is look at digital transformation as that top right corner, something that's adaptive and collaborative. How do I collaborate with the folks, my Uber driver? I don't mean to overuse that, but I think most people are aware of kind of that metaphor. But certainly it's that kind of collaboration. And if we know I'm not going to get to the airport in time, how can I be adaptive? How can I maybe find an alternate transportation? Maybe it means a different app, Uber versus Lyft, for example. So it's that kind of visibility that makes me powerful. And again, we want to get to that same kind of power at work. But now the good news, everything will be apps, everything will be networked. Right? Now we make this statement for a couple reasons. One is there's a lot of power in a network. So think about the days, this is dating myself a little bit, but on the left-hand side, in the 90s there, just think about a photograph. So it's a photograph, it's an electronic copy of a photograph. My family wants to see the kids, of course. So what I used to do is email the photos out to all the family members, and then somebody was always left out. I'm like, oh, sorry, and I have to include their email address, right? And then what happens too is that somebody changes their email, and I have to update my contact list. And probably at that time, I was thinking between a Palm Pilot and emails and all sorts of stuff. So I was moving a lot of data around and definitely a lot of maintenance just to get to a point-to-point connection where I can move the photos to my family. So then in the 2000s, what's happening is what happened is you had those portals. right? You had the Flickrs, the Yahoo photos, you had the Google photos of the world. And I said, well, let me just upload all my photos to an album, and then you go look at it, okay? Now the problem, there's a couple problems there, right? First of all, my family used to go visit like several different portals. There was my portal, there was my twin brother's portal, there was maybe a softball portal. Everybody seemed to have a portal to go to, right? So for my family to keep up with photos was pretty difficult. And for me too, I didn't want to do this all the time. So maybe I waited for like a month, got about 60 pictures, and then uploaded it. So it's not real time. So now you see where I'm going on the right-hand side with the network. You can see what, by way of what happens today, we're looking at now real-time, real-time interaction, real-time photos. So when somebody, does something funny or pretty cool, you take a photo of it, post it immediately, and right away people are thumbs up or passing it on. It's like, oh, that looks cool. How did they do that? So there's a lot of interaction right away in real time on the right-hand side. So we think that businesses are going to go to the network really for this kind of speed and connection. The other half of that too is the app side of it. So just like your phone, you have access to a network, whether it be Sprint, T-Mobile, Verizon, whatever it is. You have access to anybody in the world electronically, potentially. And so you can make those connections, basically do that through your apps. I don't know if people are aware of it. But actually, I know my kids don't know, but there's actually a phone app where you can call people. So it's one way to communicate, right? There's text. And there's LinkedIn, right? If I want to reach a business, my business context, I'll use LinkedIn. And then if I want to do in personal context, then maybe it's Instagram or something like that. So the apps define how we work with the network, who we're going to target, who we're going to connect with. Really, the apps helps us define that. So we have business context, we have a certain context, whatever it is. The apps help us to connect to the right network for that particular situation. Again, real time.
Right. So Mike, a couple of things. I mean, it's a little bit of an overused term, but I mean, it's you've heard the term. There's an app for it. That's actually very true, right? I mean, people used to say that as a joke, but today you have apps for virtually anything and everything that you want on the consumer side. Whereas in the business side of things, it's still kind of very nascent, and I think. From a software development perspective, from an adoption perspective, apps are really going to be the ones to drive the expedition of all of these functionality that we don't need individuals to be providing. I think this is very, very critical. This is what drove a lot of the growth, for example, that Salesforce had, and I think it behooves us to start looking at apps as the way to grow faster. Yeah,
and that's actually the second part of the slide here on marketplaces. If we think of these roles, seller, buyer, and partners armed with apps, then they can make these connections in real time. You can connect to the right partner, the right seller, the right buyer, and then everybody's phone's different, right? So basically, I can have the apps that I like to use, that I really enjoy using. I think it's good for the way I do things. So I have my own way of working the process too. So if you think of a marketplace where individuals are armed with their smartphone there, their own apps, you can really engage in some real-time commerce when that marketplace really hits and grows. So
that's a good segue into I'll use the example of Pinterest, right? So they have I'm assuming everybody knows what Pinterest is. It's this a solution where you go in and you like something, you put a pin on it, which will basically create a digital album for you. It grew pretty quickly, but they were trying to figure out how do you kind of go ahead and monetize this. So from the Pinterest app came up with something called Lens, which effectively provided you the ability to say, okay, I've got something that I like. Maybe it's a vacation spot. Now, using the Lens product, you could go in and then it'll direct you to travel agencies, which will take you there. Or if you like a headset, and you could go in and use the Lens product, it drives you to Amazon or one of the other e-commerce sites where you could go in and buy it. So these apps not only it is also helping the growth of commerce, and something that can be you can use the same kind of functionality for other things like AP itself that we will talk about.
Yeah. And that's actually where we want to get to. So thanks for that segue to the next slide. I mean, we want to start talking about how a network and apps fit into digital transformation, right? That's the thing we said we were going to define, right? So we want to make sure that you see through the rest of the presentation, think about the network power and the apps power that you have. Now, how do we apply that to a digital transformation? Now, let me just right off the bat go right to that statistic on the bottom. It was just something recently we found I thought was very interesting. 31% of AP think they're done with digital transformation. So I thought it was interesting. So I thought we should define it, right? Because what I think is happening there is they're thinking about the process side of it. They probably digitized or electronified a lot of things, but I don't think they're thinking along the lines of the right-hand side. In fact, I haven't seen a company yet that's really achieved 100% on all 10 of these levers on the right-hand side. So kind of want to postulate to this audience, and you're certainly welcome to put in questions and comments, but we think an adaptive enterprise will achieve these 10 levers in the future. So you'll know you'll get there when your manual processes give way to automation. I think most people agree with that, which is why I put that at the top. But now we're looking at more network data and insights. So it's not just how I put like data in front of the right role, but how do I put it into like stakeholder needs? So I have partners that might be interested in customer data. I might be sellers who are interested in my customers and what their needs are. So how do I get to that network data effect and give people the insights, even the stakeholders the insights that they need? We're gonna have roles that are more specialized and creative. So if you're doing more automated, maybe you have roles that are more specialized and do creative things now. Working on strategic. You're gonna see, and we're gonna talk about this more throughout the presentation, but a network physical and financial supply chain. Right, so we know we can move the physical world, we know we move the financial world, but can these two get, I shouldn't say get along, but can we network these supply chains and get some extra benefit? And that's actually the title, so we know the answer is yes. So we'll talk about that more as we move through how financial and the physical supply chains really connect. And if you think of your technology, so we talked about, Krish mentioned that scenario where we're connecting all the different solutions. So you're electronic and moving data around into different solutions. But how do you think about it as your solution is more of a platform? Your phone is a platform, right? It's reusing your content. It's using things like the microphone on your platform, right? So how do you get to that state where your systems and processes are using the same components, the same data? We talked about apps and the power of apps. So this is a way of introducing new people to your processes, new stakeholders, new partners, new users even. No one provider can deliver everything. And you probably, Deanna introduced me from Tradeshift, so you probably know that we'll sell you a solution, of course, but we know we can't deliver everything. So we rely on partners with apps to help us deliver, and that's why Bristlecone's with us today. Digital change management. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, when we talk about 31% think that they are done, it would be interesting to hear what the 31% have done, right? I mean, a lot of people think that when it comes to digitization of AP, having integration with procurement and having some kind of OCR solutions is really what needs to happen from a digitization standpoint. And once they get there, they think it's done. I think what we are seeing is there's a lot more to be done. Truly, in our mind, if you go through and you implement all of these levers, and I think we talk about this, is a truly touchless AP system. And that's where we want people to be driving towards.
Exactly. So, Krish, I'm glad you stopped me because I was going to go through the rest of the list, but I think you get the point. To Krish's point right there, it's a very different thing on the right-hand side than I think we're used to. So I think that's why we need to make the distinction. You probably focus more on the process side of things rather than the outcome based. So having known that, let's look at the moving forward. What is this adaptive enterprise? So we've defined it at the top there, right? That's the prize. We want to get there. And we know there's a journey to there, right? We know today you can't start and just automatically be strategic and get rid of all your operations, of course. That's not going to happen, right? So there's certainly a starting point to fix what's broken, right? So there's things that you recognize and you're aware of, and we'll talk about that in the next section. But there's things that you want to fix today, right? But know that if you set yourself up right, the base of the pyramid here then becomes a base for your operational advantage. how do we become more, or more straight through, less manual work, because that's often what that one looks like, right? And then we can start reducing that manual work. Then we can focus really on the strategic. One of the last points on the adaptive enterprise is you now have an organization that's not back office, but now really directly involved with the customer, right? Customer needs something, and now you have a group rallied behind it that can help you deliver to that customer. So take, for example, a custom solution, custom service. You now have people that know sellers and people in your ecosystem that you can then rally in real time to make sure that you can deliver for that customer. So that's the kind of thing we're looking at the top when we talk about strategic advantage and adaptive enterprise. So that's how we want to take you through today, fixing what's broken, operational, and strategic from the AP perspective. So for us, it looks something like this. We've kind of mapped out kind of a step up the value ladder, where we talk about how do you reach the adaptive enterprise. Well, it starts with a digital base. You could do a lot with a long tail spend, right? Get invoices out. Why is your AP processing 1,000 one-line invoices when they can process 1,000 lines on a single credit card statement? Easier to reconcile, and you don't have to do all these one-offs. So certainly let's get a lot of the work out, and let's start making things digital. So that's the next level, digital AP. Let's set up the organization for 100% digital transactions. And then today we're going to talk about the working capital relationship to it. So there's downstream to AP, right? There's processes down there that we're using cash when we might be trying to save cash. How can we take advantage of that, get some benefit, and possibly self-fund a digital AP program? And then we'll talk about exception-free AP, where we're going to drive out a lot more of that manual stuff that you end up doing. How do we get more straight-through processing? Because, ultimately it's going to help us save working capital again, and we just created more money there. And as Krish said, eventually we get to a state of zero AP where the machines are doing the work, right? We don't have to touch a lot of things. It's very, very strategic at this point. We're not touching things. So we define that as zero AP, and then that's your adaptive enterprise. So with that, take a quick breath and just then turn it over to fixing what's broken. Okay. So we're starting at the business ladder, or the value ladder, excuse me. And we put these challenges up because most people recognize these challenges. This is to fix what's broken, right? So we know that people are saying, I'm not getting the onboarding rates I wanted. Suppliers aren't participating. I have a lot of extra work that we're doing. Too much paper. It takes too long. Okay, we hear these, and we know all the solution providers hear the same thing. And so we know these are problems, right? We're not refuting that. But we think the focus should be more on what is really the problem here. Okay, so what we see is the organization looking a lot like the left-hand side. You have upstream procurement in their silo, and by the way, they're throwing 10 to 15 systems at their processes to make that silo go faster. Accounts payable, the same thing. We're putting 10 to 15 systems into accounts payable, make that go quicker. And then treasury, the downstream process, making the payments, also probably have a few systems of their own. And the seller's a little bit disconnected. Now, we hear the argument a lot, well, we're integrated. But to Krish's point before, that's an electronic document moving around. All right? And we know that's a problem because if you look on the right-hand side, you still see issues, even with best-in-class organizations that have systems, that have integration. Because what's ultimately happening is you have procurement that's giving you an order, right, that could possibly be have the wrong pricing or have wrong information on that order. So when the invoice comes in, it doesn't match, right? Now you can argue, wow, we're integrated. We got the order in electronic, but that order didn't match the invoice, right? So basically, we're moving a lot of electronics around. So we still see problems on the, as you can see on the right-hand side. Even though we're integrated, even though we have all these systems in place, even though we're process efficient, and from a best-in-class perspective, we still see 23% invoice exception rates. We still only have 25% of our sellers that are sending us electronic invoices. And last but not least, because we want to get into a working capital conversation too, we're only seeing 19% of early payment opportunities, right? Because of this disconnect on the inside. So what we'd like to then present to you today is talk more about, you don't have invoice challenges, although I see what the problems you're having. But think about it now that you have network challenges, because I think you understand.
So Mike, I'll just make one point. I think you kind of you alluded to this, but the stats that are being provided on the right side, which is only 25% of electronic invoices are come in from suppliers, and 19%. This is actually best in class companies, right? So you can imagine that if you're not best in class, the numbers are even smaller than that. There is a whole lot of opportunity here to improve working capital and a whole lot of improvements that we can get by moving to some of these network apps that we're talking about and leveraging the power of networks to actually, help with process efficiency also. So I just want to make sure that point is highlighted.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm glad you said that because, I mean, with some of these solutions, and if you just power the silos on the left-hand side, best in class is probably the best you're going to do. And if you look on the right-hand side, that's still not good enough. So, bringing our network and app story forward, as we talked about before, we really want to see your organizations networked, right? And what's happening in a network situation is that you have shared documents, information, and processes. So instead of moving data around from point to point, solution to solution, person to person, what you do is you have shared information. So as soon as an order changes, people that need to know are aware of it. Seller sees it, procurement knows about it, the person that ordered it would be able to see that. Maybe AP would have some visibility into it, knowing that if the invoice came in, as it usually does with the usual pricing, it's going to be out of sync. So then that's the kind of shared environment that we're talking about. Just like your apps, when you know your Uber's going to arrive to your door, you know when something's going to change. You can be agile, you can be collaborative, and you can raise your hand and say, hey, what's going on here? So that's the kind of environment we're talking about, that network and apps really in effect now to change the way you do your business, the outcome-based digitalization. So that means real-time collaboration. So just today, I know one day my son was going to be late for his baseball game. We had to try and get a ride with the neighbors, let the coach know. Happened in a matter of 30 seconds. We notified everybody that needed to know, or could get my son to baseball practice. So that's the real-time collaboration and power that you have to make sure that people are aware, people can help you out. You can be agile and collaborative, which means digital has to be the default. That's the quickest way I know to move information and documents, information, and processes throughout a network. Digital is the fastest way to go for visibility and for moving things forward. So that's why we see digital as the default. So if we could set up that default and make sure that you have the foundation in place, then everything really just builds off that digital. So with that, we want you to connect your sellers on a digital network. I think there's all the benefits we talked about, which means reduce your seller support and AP work and create the foundation for 100% digital transactions. And what that looks like, hit the wrong button, sorry. And what that really looks like, if you set up a foundation of digital, there's a lot of things that are happening. I don't think people realize this, but there's it's not just the POs and invoices moving digitally, but you're really capturing the data first and foremost with the supplier onboarding. So with 1 and 2, once that supplier is on board, you're accelerating the content that you have access to. And that's the supplier master data for one thing. There's also product data that you have from the sellers, the pricing. All this stuff now accelerates and moves in real time on the network. You can even use in 3, you can use partners to enrich that data. You can know if a seller is sustainable. We'll help your sustainability programs, for instance, or help minority-owned business programs, whatever you have. So you can enrich that supplier data with information from partners on the network. Global becomes.
So let me, if I can add one thing, Mike. Right. So I've run large P2P organizations in my past career, and one of the big challenges that we had was keeping the supplier master data that Mike's alluding to. What kind of certification do you have? Are there certain specific validations that you need to do? All of this would take us hours and weeks to gather, right? By having this kind of a network solution, it one, puts the onus on the suppliers, and then 2, it just dramatically improves the ability to have correct data in a very, very accelerated manner. So,
Yeah.
I think this is critical. I want to reemphasize that, supplier master data is one of the hardest things to crack, and this allows us an option, and this provides us the ability to do that.
Yeah, yeah. And it's certainly a foundation, right? There's a lot of business processes that use that seller data. Who are you going to pay? Who are you going to send the order to? So we know that we need that master data. It needs to be correct. Because you certainly don't want to send the payment on an invoice to an incorrect bank account or address or anything like that. So we want to make sure that all that data is correct, verified, enriched if you want to, and then available to any process that needs it. Again, using the phone analogy, when you put on a new app on your phone, doesn't it ask you if you want to use your contacts? I think that's pretty cool. Like, yep, use my contacts, and it's basically you're off and running and using that app. So same premise on a platform. You can, new supply chain processes can use the data that's already in place. So that's the speed that you're getting. And global just was really about the reach here. That on a network, on a network, you certainly reach global. You have that kind of access in a digital network. You can reach the globe. But the what I really want to press here is really about that compliance and for tax and e-invoicing purposes. That really the network can take care of it. The network knows the rules, right? There's certain rules that everybody must follow to do e-invoicing in China, for example. The platform's going to know the rules. In fact, if they change, the platform would take care of that. So basically, you can rely on the platform to achieve your global reach, but also know that you're compliant to those e-invoicing and tax rules. And that's really when the collaboration on the last one really starts kicking in, right? As soon as you have a supplier that's engaged, working with you, there's shared information, even at this level, the collaboration really happens. And we've seen that quite a bit, where suppliers are contributing new parts, new processes that are helping process efficiency, but also the final product that it's cheaper to deliver to the customer. So that's, so even at a base level, we talked about that digital AP rung of the ladder. A lot of benefits in getting this foundation in place. And I quickly want to take you through one use case that we've seen. I think it's very powerful, where a company that's on the level of multinational consumer products company came to us and said, we simply just want to reduce the phone calls. We said, yeah, but there's a network and apps. We're like, no, you're not listening. We just want to reduce the phone calls. He's like, all right, we can do that. So we started this network, and you can see on the stat on the right top, 5,000 suppliers activated in less than 4 weeks. That means they had visibility into when they were going to get paid. So over time, as the number of sellers increased, we see in the first phase up to 19,000. They're able to reduce the call centers because they weren't getting calls anymore. They said, go onto the network, go see your status there. In fact, you're going to know when I know when you're going to get paid. So just go onto the network and view it there. Stop calling me. So they're able to close the call centers based on that. And the interesting thing was then how that built from there. So 19,000 suppliers on board. Well, let's start e-invoicing and let's go to different countries. So this will segue nicely into the next part of the presentation. We talk about some of the working capital benefit. What they wanted to do is introduce early payment, given that they had the network in place, and start seeing now, being able to then extend DPO, days payable outstanding, not pay the bills right away, but wait a little bit. But do that in a way that's not going to hurt the seller relationship, right? Or maybe I could use my cash to get some discount there. So that's the next level for them. So great segue into the next part of the conversation, where we talk about what is the working capital benefit. But we kind of word it a little bit differently, because this is really about the seller getting value at this point. So how do you get a seller to adopt? So one of the challenges that we said before is my sellers aren't participating, and that, we can't get them on board quick enough. So what happens if we start adding value to that relationship, that they can get paid much quicker? So we're talking about early payment opportunities here. So there's value to that seller to join the network and say, yeah, if I need the cash, I'd like to make that known and see if I can get that cash as early as possible. So in the next part of our presentation here, what we'd like to talk about is really how you get to that seller value. So the benefit of a network is actually many. So a network drives the value for both buyers and sellers. So we talk about the working capital benefit on the buyer side, and a seller that needs cash can certainly access the cash if they need it. It's an option. They don't have to, but they can access that. But we do this for all your sellers. And why? Because on a network, you can have all the parties involved. You have buyers, of course, right? You have sellers that could say, hey, I need that opportunity. And then you have the financial institutions that are part of your network that could say, you know what, I can offer a sweet deal at this point in time based on the situation, based on the market. All right, so there's kind of a lot of different people at play that can give the right benefit to all parties. Buyers get the working capital, banks get a new opportunity for financing, or any financial institution to do that. Sellers can get the benefit of early payment. So we look at the opportunity, something like this on the right-hand side, and this is really the buyer, us talking to a buyer and saying this is the benefit. So we know there's benefit to AP automation, right? We know that you're going to see the benefit when the digital starts to kick in and you're automating your AP processes. But on top of that, you could see a 2x return from early payments, from supply chain financing, where you're seeing you're not having to pay your bills right away. You can use your cash, days payable outstanding, use your own cash, or dynamic discounting. If you use your cash right away, you're going to do better than money market rates. So that's where the 2x is coming from. Now know that on the left-hand side, this is very important, right? You have to then get the left-hand side right in order for the right-hand side to really work. So that means on the left-hand side, we have to then provide the invoices fast enough, so approve the invoices as quick as we can, and we have to then that's going to provide the extra return. So if we get the left-hand side right, we get the invoices done quick enough, we develop the opportunities on the right-hand side in order to make that 2x return work for you. So basically, you'll hear me refer to this kind of throughout the presentation from now on, as we just built an engine of cash, right? So let's feed this engine as much as possible.
So again, Mike, I'd like to bring in the whole overlay the concept of networks over here, right? I mean, so when you don't have a network solution or where you have multiple partners in the network, right? So you have vendors, you have your AP organizations, you have banks. You need all of these to truly leverage the supply chain financing component of it. It's if in a non-network solution, you're not going to have the ability to do supply chain financing from external parties like banks. That's a very, very powerful benefit of having a network solution.
Yeah. In fact, let's talk about the network and the platform again. We talked about apps. Let me just build this out. But the reason you have value to all your sellers is you have many opportunities available to you. Some of these, as you kind of maybe heard my words, recognize that in some cases you'll need financial institutions. In some cases it's your own cash, right? Your own treasury, and we have the cash available and we can use it as an opportunity. So the benefit of the network is really having that visibility to what are the opportunities, who has the best opportunity, and how do we take advantage of it. So basically that's a long way of saying that there's value to all your sellers. Different programs meet different tiers of sellers, but also you can be flexible about what option you use based on your current situation. We have a lot of cash at the moment. Let's use our own cash then and get some returns. So basically, we can provide benefit to all sellers when you think about a network, right? And many companies are saying, I'm connected to 55% of my sellers, which is actually a pretty good rate if you think about it. I don't think many have achieved 55%, but I think that was a statistic I saw recently. So 55% of my sellers are connected electronically. And people often say, well, isn't that good enough? So I really need the other 45%. And one of the answers to that is really around this, that aren't you missing some of those opportunities for early payment by not capturing that 45%? Isn't that 45% probably the ones that need the cash the most and are willing to pay more maybe, or maybe do it more often? So think about that, what's in that 45%. Maybe it's those that are really need the cash and can really, again, feed more money into your engine of, or more invoices, I should say, into your engine of cash. So
yeah, I think you're making the point on the x-axis, the right side, right? The long tail suppliers. I think I've seen way too many organizations who say, okay, let's use the 80-20 rule. Let's take the big ones, and then not worry about the long tail. And I think that's fine from a from a strategy as to who you onboard first, but I think it's important to realize that the long tail sometimes, contributes to a lot in terms of our expenses. And, there is a definite opportunity there using, the dynamic discounting and supply chain finance options to tap into all of that also. And I think people have to start thinking about that as a long-term strategy.
Yeah. And coming back to a statistic on this slide, if you remember when we showed the siloed organizations, and one of the statistics we showed was best in class getting about 19% of early payment opportunities. And now we're coming back to that, revisiting it, and showing you how would a network then increase those opportunities. And it does it on two levels. And in fact, there's actually a third, but I'll mention that in a second. But let's just take the two because it's easier to draw on a slide. One of the ways is more supplier participation, right? So now more suppliers are electronically connected to you, more have access to that, so they're able to then make themselves known and say, hey, I would love to have this early payment opportunity because I really need that cash for payroll or whatever that is, all right? The second axis is faster invoice processing. So we know that time is money. So the point here is that the sooner you can process an invoice, the more likely you're going to get a bigger return. So I always use the 90-day example where if you can approve an invoice in a day, seller's going to be like, ooh, I have to wait 89 days to get paid. Yeah, I'll take an early payment opportunity right now. Versus the other scenarios, you process an invoice in 89 days, and the seller's going to say, wow, I get paid tomorrow, 0% for you. So the time is money, right? The sooner you get these invoice processes, the higher the return. So there's two things that work here, more participation from your sellers and more higher returns from the fast invoice processing. And the third one I said I was going to mention is also the banks are involved now. Any financial institution is networked into this process, right? That you allow, of course. So they can also help and, say, I can give you an opportunity at the moment if you don't have the cash. So they have access in view and can offer the opportunities that maybe weren't offered before. So that's the power of a network, again, for the working capital benefit. So knowing that we want higher seller participation and faster invoice processing leads us to one of our most challenging invoice processes of all. And that's really where the manual workflows kick in, the coding and the approvals. I hear so many times that folks are saying, like, we have too many manual processes, our workflows are too slow, our cycle times are too slow. So if we want to create that engine of money again, where we have more invoices involved and faster invoice approvals where we get the higher returns, this is really going to be a challenging area for you, right? So we certainly want the goal of being more straight-through processing. So today what we like to talk about is, really how do we automate invoice processing for more straight-through processing? So where do we get the benefit of the automation? We talked about that's part of the adaptive enterprise. Manual gives way to automated, right? But we know, right, there's going to be manual. So where manual is needed, how do we get the fewest touches? How do we get that work item that's being floated around? How do we get that back to the critical path as quick as possible? So that's really what this is about in just a couple slides. The network, again, working to help out to the networking platform and the apps helping out to get to straight-through processing. So certainly when you have all the digital data in play and you start getting processes flowing through in a digital fashion, you have access to not only data, but really how that data is being used. So for a certain seller, it always comes in this particular way. So why approve it every single time? All right? Or why have somebody code it when it was coded 3 times before? So this is where the machines start coming in and learning to do the work. This is how manual gives way to automation. That we can have not only the machines doing the work for us, but they can also suggest, which is part of the second part here. So when the people do get involved, well, how do we make that go quicker? Well, we could suggest the right person, right? We know the last time it came in, or we know who's the category manager for this particular seller. We know these things. Why can't we get it routed to the right person based on the situation in history? So even where the humans are involved, not only do we have the benefit of the machine learning, making suggestions, and maybe doing the work for us, but we have this real-time collaboration too. Again, like I overuse my Uber example, but when that person's not arriving on time, you can certainly text them and call them, or just look at the map on your phone and know when it's going to arrive. So it's that real-time effect that puts people at ease but also enables them to be more agile and adapt to whatever the new situation presents. So that's really what, we were impressed what a network and apps do to make that, to make life go better for the exception-free processing. So kind of round that out with some results that we've seen, and then we'll talk about the adaptive enterprise. We'll pick that back up again. But certainly some results along the lines that we talked about. Global food processing and commodities company, 22 days shorter invoice processing time. That certainly gives them the benefit of more and better working capital situations, higher rates of return. In fact, they have a 24% higher discount capture rate. So it's not 24%, it's 24% higher discount capture rate. Similarly with the healthcare shared service, 100% reduction in those calls we talked about. That's the benefit of digital AP, that they're not getting all those queries and phone calls. Where's my invoice? When am I going to get paid? I mean, because they know when we know when they're going to get paid. So why call me? You might as well just check it yourself. And with that digital, 60% faster invoice processing cycles. So really love the quote on the right too. Just again, another result for you here. Number of e-invoices has grown by over 500%, resulting in 75% no-touch rate and 88% savings. So the 75% no-touch rate is certainly a great thing to have achieved. But I'll bet that he won't say he's done with digital transformation just yet. There's certainly more to go. But it's definitely well on your way to something that's more automated versus doing all that manual work. So that's just great stats for them. So we'll take just about 5 more minutes for the adaptive enterprise, and we'll open up for questions. So please have those questions ready, and you can put those in the chat. I think it's on the right-hand side. It is on mine. So go ahead and start feeding those questions. We'll take those in about 5 minutes. But let's come back to the adaptive enterprise. You remember this was something that is an adaptive and collaborative digital transformation. We want you to have the power of the apps that you have at home. We want you to have that power at work too. But it also has to be your own. So if you think of the adaptive enterprise, I mean, it's really about your business. So how do you make it your own? How does it become your partners, your processes, digitally connected on a global network? Because that leads to the supply chains that are more agile, efficient, and differentiating. So everybody's adaptive enterprise and the path to there is going to be different. And this is really where I just want to talk about Tradeshift in a couple slides. What we're about is the apps and the network. The apps is the common platform for the adaptive enterprise to connect and collaborate with the supply chain. So just like today, you have that digital experience on your phone with the apps. It's that same thing that we want to bring to the business place, right? That you have that way of being digitally active and connected to your partners. And in fact, you can digitally insert new processes as apps at any point in the processes. Right? You can say, I want to work with this particular partner for this particular process. Why? Because they're the expert. So just to let you kind of know what that looks like, it might look like something like this, where because of the different partners and processes that you have and you run and that you want to work with, your AP process might be some different partners that you want to engage for different points in time. So Coface, for example, and Freedom verify supplier data to make sure you're working with the right data and the right sellers. We have some extensibility and ways to create some very specific processes around direct materials integration. You might work with specific AI tools, BI tools, excuse me. And then certainly you want to work with banks and financial institutions that you want to work with. So this is just to kind of point out that it's really your partners, your processes, so you can build your process the way you need to that fits your particular needs. That's the power of the...
So Mike doesn't. I think it would be important to talk about the apps and partnerships that you have from a logistics standpoint. I think that's another area where I think there's a lot of blind spots, if you will, at this point in time. And I know that you are particularly strong in that space, right?
Yeah. And in fact, I mean, it's not necessarily the partners we work with too, but the partners that you want to work with. So a lot of these logos came into play because someone said, I want to work with this particular partner. And we said, yeah, okay, let's do that. And in fact, so we could do that as well. So basically we just want you to be able to create your own processes but create that digital experience which is about this last slide that I'll do, and I'll turn to Krish. But really, I mean, you know, we talked about the power of that phone, the power of your personal life, and we want to bring that experience to work. You know, everybody's phone's different. So your phone, you know, I bet we put all our phones together. No one had the same two phones and apps and things like that. So it's just the way that we want to work. So we want to make sure on the right-hand side in the business context, you also have that opportunity. It's the way your company wants to work. It's the way your particular users want to work. So they have the benefit of the apps and really the user experience too of apps, knowing that if I click a specific app, I'll be able to drive the process that I need to do. And it's really that model that has enabled us to work really closely with Bristlecone. So I'll really give it over to Krish here to talk about that.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll take just a minute to talk about our partnership with Tradeshift. We have truly a 360-degree partnership. We are not just an implementation partner, but we have a strong relationship with from our product development perspective also. So Bristlecone actually helps build a lot of Tradeshift solutions. We are also working with Tradeshift in building the actual apps that we've been talking about. There are very specific applications that will power the whole AP solutioning that we are actually building for them. And apart from that, we are also obviously we've got a number of consultants who have been trained and certified on the Tradeshift platform that helps support a number of the implementations. But more importantly, it's we go to market together. It's the point I'm making is it's not just an implementation partner kind of a relationship, but a truly 360-degree one where we are connected at the hip with Tradeshift on a number of different facets. And we just put a few of our customers that we are working together on, Conning, Best Buy, Smuckers, Levi's, just to name a few, and then a lot more outside of these.
Yeah, and that's a good list of customers right there. Really going at that adaptive enterprise, making it their own. They want to use we talked before about customers bringing us apps. They're ones that have brought us apps because they want to work with those specific partners. So it's certainly a great opportunity to engage the experts as we have with Bristlecone. So I want to thank Krish for joining us today and adding the value around digital transformation.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, with that, I'd like to take some questions before time runs out if there are any questions available. Deanne, you there? Do you have some questions?
Yes. I don't see any questions right now. If you do have any questions, please put it in your chat box. Thank you so much, Mike and Krish, for this informative presentation. If you have any questions after this webinar and you want to reach us, you can reach us at sales@tradeshift.com. If you want to reach Tradeshift or Bristlecone, just email us at sales@tradeshift.com and I'll get you the information that you need. Thank you so much for attending the webinar today. I hope this was informative and hopefully we'll see you on a next webinar. Have a great day. Bye, everyone.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.